Welcome to All Electric Conversations, where we talk with pioneers in traveling with electric vehicles. We're your hosts, Katie and Steve Krivolovic of the All Electric family. From road trips and towing to daily life, we'll hear stories of wanderlust and progress to inspire your own adventures with All Electric Conversations.
So welcome back to Electric Conversations. We have Andy here. He has been somebody I've been wanting to talk to because he has my favorite car, but we've talked to people that have towed with the Model Y and towed with the Model X. But before we get into that, tell us a little bit about you, Andy, and where you live.
Well, I'm in London, Ontario, and I operate Can-Am RV Center, which we've been here for 53 years and an Airstream dealer all that time. And we've always experimented with tow vehicles and hitches and towing, and that just came out by an unusual set of circumstances and the fact that we actually travel and RV ourselves. I've been traveling in a trailer since I was a year old. My kids grew up traveling in one, and now I got the grandkids going. So it's
That's awesome.
yeah. So the Tesla was just kind of a natural extension to that. I'd like to say I was smart enough to be in right from the beginning, but for a few years I kind of thought didn't make sense, and so it kind of a gradual process for me. But we've now hooked up 52 for customers and several more scheduled for this spring, and
Wow.
so it's becoming pretty common.
Yeah.
Nice.
That's awesome. And so what is your exact setup that you have? What are you towing with?
Well, a little bit of how I got to where I am,
Yeah.
my previous tow vehicle was a Jaguar XJ with a supercharged 5-liter, 500 horsepower. I like cars that don't look like a sports car, but drive like one, so you can get away with a lot more. And but it was a 2012. I had 110,000 miles on it, and they were supposed to introduce a new version in 2022, and they teased the odd picture of it and stuff. And I was waiting for the new one to come out. The big BMWs and Mercedes are more boulevard cruisers. The Jag actually drove terrific, and it was a great tow vehicle.
Mm-hmm.
So then in the fall of 2019, they announced that they weren't going to build that car. It was going to come out in 2025 as an electric. And for a bit, I thought, well, geez, I don't want an electric car. I really like how it works. And but we had a lot of customers asking about it all the time, so we thought we should at least start experimenting with it and get to know it a little better. So in the fall of 2019, we bought a Model 3 and put a substantial hitch on it so we could tow just about anything, and started driving it and towing with it. And I pretty quickly realized I'd rather drive the Model 3 than the Jaguar. So then I realized, okay, Jaguars figured this out. They know that in 5 years, nobody's buying a gas-powered luxury car.
Yeah.
So as soon as the refresh Model S came out, I ordered that, and it's just a great machine. I love that car. It's funny. I'd always said I wanted a V12 before I died. And in the spring, a customer brought in an Aston Martin to trade in.
Mm-hmm.
And it's a beautiful car.
Yeah.
But I took it down the road and I went, if I kept this thing, it would just sit in the garage because I'd always drive the Tesla.
Yeah.
I'm a slow learner, but I've come full.
That's awesome. Those are all fun vehicles.
Yeah.
So you have the Model S refresh. Is it the long range or the plaid?
I figured I could get in enough trouble with the long range. I did not get it.
Yes, I'm sure.
Yeah. It's pretty easy.
Plenty fast enough.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so what Airstream do you have?
Well, for 30 years, my wife has said, can we not just have an Airstream that's ours? Because we would always pull something off the lot, and usually be something I wanted to try out and different things.
Mm-hmm.
So, and I said, I'm just going to sell it anyway. So we never did that. so we wanted to customize one for the Tesla. So I said to her, "What do you want?" Because I figured I owed her that she should pick what she wanted. And so she wanted a 27-foot Tommy Bahama with a hatch. We'd used one for a vacation. She really liked it, so that was her favorite. So that's what we're
Beautiful.
and as soon as they come out with a 30-foot with a hatch, it will be for sale.
Yeah, that hatch is so cool on those. I love them, but we need the backspace for the bunk. So
Understand that.
yeah, yeah. So like this setup is obviously not your typical setup and not what people expect to see you towing with a Model S if people would expect to see anything being towed with a Model S. So explain why you made that choice to go with, the Model S over the Model X or, a totally different electric vehicle. And then why does it work?
Well, the I went to Colorado and back in July, and then in November we went to Florida and back, which actually turned out further than Colorado. And myself at the moment, I just really like the Tesla charging network.
Yes.
I can't imagine doing it without that. And it just always works, and it's hassle free. And for somebody who's not big into technology, I just like it to be easy, and that works well. A Model S and a Model X are the same platform. There's really very little difference in the two vehicles. The S has a lower center of gravity, which makes it a little more stable. The X is extremely stable tow vehicle, but the S is a little more so. And then it's a little more streamlined, so you tow with what you have left over after pushing the tow vehicle. So if you can make the tow vehicle more efficient, you have more reserve for towing. So that's what drove the Model S on it. And then now the most popular of those 52 Teslas we've set up, the most popular one's been the Y. About half are Ys. And then
Interesting.
I mean, when you have customers come in and set that up, what is the reasoning that they pick the Model Y, or have you, I guess, figured that out?
well, these days everybody wants an SUV, so I
Okay.
think that there's no logical reason for an SUV. It's just that's what people want.
Yeah.
And an awful lot of what we do is probably logical. So, and the Y works. It's basically a 3 with a little bit more of a lift to it. And I haven't yet had a chance to do a back-to-back test, but I think probably when you're towing, there's very little difference in the range. The
Really?
bit of extra drag in the Y over the 3 is probably blocking a bit of air for the trailer. So it's
Yeah. So, I want to know about this trip that you made to Colorado, because you had to have been there around the same time we were, and that would have been awesome to run into you. So tell us a bit about that.
Yeah. So what my theory was, I said, because everybody talks about range. And I don't know about you, but I get a little sick of people asking me about range
Oh,
now.
yeah.
But
Yeah.
including the guy I picked up at the side of the road that ran out of gas. You asked me what my range was, and I went, "Really?"
That story.
But the so what I got thinking about was, you probably still drive as far in a day with a Tesla as you can with a gas-powered car. Pretty darn close to it. It's just you're going to use your time differently. And my thought process was, and this is before we even bought the 3, I said, you're probably going to have to drive 55 miles an hour. You're going to drive maybe 2 hours, and then you're going to, in my mind, you were going to charge for an hour. And I said, so 3 hours to go 100 miles, but it's going to be a very relaxing 100 miles. And so I could probably do that 5 times in a day.
Yeah.
Now, the reality is the charge time is, 20 to 35 minutes. And I generally drive going to Colorado and back the entire trip. I had the cruise control set at 60 miles an hour just to be scientific about it. And so it was, of course, the drive time was less. And what I did there, I did 500 miles or 600 miles a day, depending on the day. And now I was just by myself, but I'd hop out of bed in the morning, grab a bottle of water and a snack, and I'd start driving. And then at the first supercharger, I'd have breakfast. The next one, I'd have a shower. And then the third one, it's lunchtime. So it was all stuff you were going to spend time doing. You just
Yeah.
broke it up differently. And yet at the end of the day, I didn't feel like I'd driven 600 miles. It was I said I'm doing road trips wrong my entire life. That this has
Yeah.
been in December, we came back from Florida. We left Orlando, and we were back home in 2 days. Now, there was an ice storm coming. I probably wouldn't have done that in 2 days. I would have probably stopped, but we wanted to stay ahead of the ice storm. So
Yeah.
yeah.
How far was that trip? You did that in 2 days?
Yeah, Orlando to here is about 1,200 miles.
Wow.
And and now, when you, what really surprised me about that is when you get to Georgia, all through Georgia and Florida, there's superchargers every 30, 40 miles, and they're almost all version 3. So
wow.
it's very easy. And a friend of mine, he's a little older than I am, even, which is hard to believe is possible, and he's got an older Mercedes that he wanted to take down to Florida, and he didn't want to drive on his own. So I said, well, you can, drive down with us, but it's going to be a different schedule than you're used to.
Yeah.
So he drove, and it was worked out perfect for him. He could grab a nap and stuff like that when he wanted to.
Yeah.
We stayed overnight just south of Atlanta, and we were going to St. Pete's Beach. And so in the morning, he said, I think I'm going to go on ahead. So I get down there a little quicker and get my place opened up and stuff like that. And I said, yeah, that's fine. If you have trouble, we'll be behind you anyway.
Yeah.
And so he drove his Mercedes with the cruise control set at 77 miles an hour the whole way. And we got there 2.5 hours after he did, towing the trailer. And, if I'd been towing the trailer with a gas car, I'd have still been an hour and a half. So it really didn't make that big of a difference. I was quite surprised.
Yeah. And that's things that we have found as well, that when you get there, that travel exhaustion is not the same as how when you're in a gas vehicle and you just go, 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 and you push it and, you push it a little too far, and it's so eye-opening the first time you take that first trip with the EV and you're like, oh, this is the way we should have been doing this all along,
I no longer have to unwrap my fingers off the steering wheel one time.
Yeah. When you're stretching your hands because you've been hanging onto the steering wheel for so long, you're like, okay, that's a sign I should take a break.
It's funny, but my wife still drives a Jaguar. She's got one, and it's a very nice car. And the morning after I got back from Colorado, I had to run up into London quick, and I took her car. Mine was hooked up to the trailer, and I was amazed how loud it was. So I think that's part of it too. You just get by the time I got back to Colorado, the Tesla didn't seem extremely quiet. You have to get into something else to realize how much difference there is.
Yeah.
That's true. Yeah.
Yeah. So, have you ever run into any trouble with towing the camper with, on any of your trips that you've taken or anything?
Or even the 52, hitches that you...
Oh, yeah.
Because I'm sure these people would bring it back to you and say, hey.
Yeah. We've had now, so far, most of the people that we've set up Teslas for already had a Tesla or had some experience with it. So they're not going, I'm getting a Tesla and I'm getting a trailer and this whole thing is new. That might be a tall, and it would just depend on the person.
Yeah.
But no, one of our customers, they told, he's got a Model 3 that we set up 2019. And he was out to Prince Rupert, BC with it this summer. He was 5 days from here to Prince Rupert. That's not an easy trip to do, and he did the whole thing. And it's going to Florida. We had I don't know if you saw in the news, Buffalo had a huge dumping of snow back in November. So that was the day we were leaving for Florida. and our first leg is from London to Detroit, which parallels Lake Erie, and we that was a complete headwind that whole way,
Wow.
about 65 kilometers an hour, about 35-mile-an-hour headwind. So,
Whoa.
and it's from my house to the supercharger is 90 miles. So I said, okay, this will be, and it was also about 18 degrees Fahrenheit outside. so,
Yeah.
so I charged in the driveway overnight, preheated the car, and we took off. And that stretch, I kept it down. I was 50 miles an hour
Yeah.
from,
Hmm.
and we made it with about. Well, there's one stretch where it's single lane construction for about 6 miles. So in that stretch, I put it up to 60 just so I didn't have a
Yeah.
bunch of people angry with me. But we made it. I think we had 8% or 10% left when we got there. So that's probably the most challenging segment I've had since I got the car. But yeah, it was still very doable.
Which is
And they have
still
other,
really good,
yeah,
if you ask me.
Yeah.
yeah. It's the and the stability. It's just oblivious to the trailer. You forget. You got to remind yourself that it's on there. It's
Hmm.
solid as rock on the road. And hill when we were in Colorado, we did. I wanted to try it in the mountains because I was curious if it would overheat.
Hmm.
People racing
Yeah.
get them overheated and they go to limp mode and that. So we went up over through the Eisenhower Tunnel,
Hmm.
and it was like it wasn't there. And we
Hmm.
charged in Silverthorne, Colorado, and we went over Vail Pass to Vail, back to Silverthorne. And what really blew me away was my watts per mile. So I averaged 628 watts per mile for that trip. And that section was like 570. And I thought, well, how can that be? I went over this pass twice.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And all I
That's
could, my thought is that the the pass didn't matter much because the energy I used pulling the weight up the hill, I recaptured going back
hmm
down
Yeah.
again, and elevation change was zero. But of course, the whole time I was at high elevation between 8 and 10,000
Yeah.
feet. So I guess the air was thinner, so I had less air
Hmm.
drag.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so so we left Silverthorne, and we said, well, that was too easy. So we went up over Loveland Pass, which is the 2-lane road, and
Yeah.
it's 12,000 feet at the top. And you just drive with the traffic. It didn't phase it at all. Never touched the brakes coming down the other side. Yeah, it's really, and even going to Florida, I've driven from here to Florida about 30 times
Hmm.
in my life, and all towing. And it's just so funny to just not even acknowledge that there's a hill there.
Yeah.
But
Yeah. And I mean, obviously, you've been towing trailers for a really long time. And like, is there anything that you miss from towing with a gas vehicle or, you
Diesel.
know, yeah, or diesel or whatever you were towing with before? Like, is there anything that you miss or, has the EV, once you've made the switch, you're kind of like, this is the way to go?
yeah, there's not much I've found that I miss about it at all. And when I went to Colorado, I took a generator with me just in case. And that was more because I thought I might get talking on the phone or something and drive by an exit and exit someplace. Well, you live out there, but yeah, it was just dead weight. It was no use at all. I never came close to needing it. Now, if you were going to Alaska, there's a couple of places yet that you would travel to that would be pretty tough
Hmm.
without carrying a generator or some other means to charge. It's
Yeah.
funny, one of the customers that's one of the first people with a Tesla that we set up, we were talking and she said, it's funny you discover that electricity is almost everywhere.
Yeah. Yes, it is.
Most of us like it.
Yeah.
Yeah, very true.
Yeah.
This is awesome. So, what are some of the things that do you tell us about, like how much you have to modify the vehicle or anything like that with the hitch? Because when a Model S or a Model 3 comes out of the factory, my understanding is they do not have any sort of hitch or anything like that. You don't have to go into grave detail with it, but I'm just curious, like
Yeah.
how much modifications do we have to do with that?
So it's and this is something we've been doing for 50 years, so it's not something new with the Tesla. And when uh, I was reading Elon's test mule for the Model S was actually a Jaguar because he insisted it be an aluminum body. And his designer said, well, aluminum bodies are harder to build and everything else. He said, no, it has to be aluminum to offset the weight of the batteries. And so he said, they said, well, nobody's really doing aluminum. He said, Jaguars are aluminum. Go buy a Jaguar. So they made a Jaguar into the first test mule. So when you actually go underneath it, a lot of it's somewhat similar. So we've done several Jags over the years, and I've towed with one since 2004. So it was fairly straightforward to find the attachment points. The key to a weight distribution hitch receiver on the vehicle is distance. The more you spread those loads out over the vehicle chassis, the stronger your installation is. So on the Model S or the Model 3, we start with one of the bolt-on hitch receivers, but then we extend the center of that up to in between the back wheels. So we're through that lower trunk well, there's a little bump in there now in the carpet, and there's a bar that goes through from the front to the rear that takes that pressure from the weight distribution and spreads it up to the front wheels. And so it makes it exponentially stronger. A standard hitch on a Model X, the bolts are about 5 inches apart, and now we're doing it about 2.5 feet apart. So we're getting a lot more spread on it. So the car modification is actually pretty simple. We modified the trailer a lot more. Okay. We took off most all of the attachments that catch air on the outside of it, and put a shorter bumper on that doesn't catch air. Underneath, we put the holding tank stick down at the front on a 27, so we put a V deflector underneath it to divert air around the tanks. We moved the propane tanks back further, closer to the body. We switched them to 20s to get the height of the cover down. So a bunch of things on the trailer. That saves about 100 watts per mile.
Wow.
And I'd love to tell you what each of those does, but we just didn't have time to try and test it in between. To try it in between, you got to get the weather right to do it each time. And now it turns out we probably did have time because we started doing this in January of 2020. And my plan was to take the Airstream and the Model 3 to the Airstream rally in Denver that year. So those plans got changed, and we actually had a little more time than what we thought. But
nice. Well, that sounds awesome. So, are there a lot of people that are doing this to their Airstream as well, what you're talking about, or is this just something you came up with and started implementing yourself?
Yeah, we haven't really done it to any others yet. We offer it to customers if they'd like to do it. A lot of them say, well, we'll try it first and then see what we want to do afterwards. The only thing you really miss on it, it doesn't really change anything how the trailer operates, except that I've removed the air conditioner. Now, we almost never, my wife and I almost never use the air conditioner. It's of course, we're in Canada in the summer, it's in the winter, so it's not a big issue for us. And we just don't like air conditioning that much. I believe some of the suppliers are working on a split system AC, where the condenser and that will go underneath the trailer, and then you'll just have a little air diffuser inside the trailer with the evaporator, and then that turnip will come off of the roof to get rid of it. But
that would be super nice.
I'll probably put one in to try it and just to have it there.
Yeah.
Nice.
That's, I mean, to me, it's amazing that it takes that makes that much difference of just taking, things off of the trailer that are catching, and, it's goes to show you that, one of the things that we found is that the aerodynamics matter way more than the weight of the trailer especially when you're towing with an EV for,
it's all about efficiency.
Yes, yeah, it's incredible how much, and I think that shows just how much it really does matter how to have that aerodynamic trailer when you're towing with an EV.
Yeah, Because it's almost 20%, right? That
Yeah,
20% increase in efficiency.
yeah,
That's pretty good.
yeah.
So,
Not most of it's not that hard to do. It's fairly straightforward. Those big skylights that stick up with the big bubbles on them, we removed those and we put quarter-inch Lexan over the opening,
yeah,
and so that's flush. And then we got rid of the front fantastic fan. I figured just because it's right by where the air comes over the roof, that was probably not good. But we kept the rear one, so we still have one in there. The We eliminated the bathroom exhaust fan because I've got 400 watts of the Zamp Obsidian panels. They're fairly thin,
mhm.
and they're right in a line, so there's only one leading edge, and so that eliminated the bathroom exhaust fan on the 27. That's about the only change in operation of it. And what we find is we almost never plugged it without running air conditioning. Um, we have a 3,000 watt inverter in the trailer and a 200 amp hour lithium battery. So we really almost never plug the trailer in, even if there's power at the site. We just don't need it most of the time, and that
Yeah,
we just plug the car in.
Yeah.
yeah. If you're not using the power hungry air conditioner, then you
Yeah,
you really don't need that.
yeah.
That is. So are those solar panels? This is mostly me geeking out. Are those solar panels rigid or are they flexible?
They're rigid.
Rigid. Yeah. Nice.
And the early flexible panels we had really good luck with, and a lot of those are still working and working well. But then something seemed to change in them, and we started having a whole bunch of trouble with them. So we went back to we replaced most of those middle ones with rigids.
Yeah.
But I didn't like the 1 inch thick frame sticking up there. So the Zamp is only, I think it's 3/8 of an inch thick. So it makes a nice clean shape.
They do make them pretty thick. I have
Yeah.
some that I need to put on top of our camper, and that it is a little thicker than I would like. So
Yeah. So,
But you like to push the limit and like and like
yeah.
see how low can we pull into the charger with and so much to my my heart palpitations as we're going down the road like
well, that's
Oh, yeah.
it was easier to do that with a Tesla, and
yeah
now I find myself pulling in, which maybe to other people is still really low, but I find that I'm pulling in now with 15 or 20% charge still because the public charging, at least here in the States, is, obviously very poor.
Yeah, and I haven't got it to work well in Canada either.
Really.
Now they there's they're claiming it's going to get better, and I did use one Electrify America charger in Key Largo, Florida. Uh, just because I could have gone to the Tesla charger, but it's in a really crowded spot in southern Miami. So I thought, well, I'll try this thing.
Mhm.
And before I left, I downloaded the app and I put money on the account and all that stuff. When I got there, it wouldn't work at all. But if I put my credit card on it, it worked. So
Oh,
I've still got $25 in Electrify America. And then, two of them didn't work. The third one did. It's the one thing that's good. They have a little longer cords, so sometimes it's a little easier to get in. I noticed, but
not have
yeah
to unhook.
yeah. And then I have uh, the Barker Manufacturing makes a jack that used to be on the Airstreams called a super jack. It's about twice as fast as all the other electric jacks. So I have that on the trailer. And then
nice
part of streamlining the trailer, I reduced the hitch weight quite a lot. And the Tesla's so stable, it doesn't need that high hitch weight that sometimes comes on them. So yeah, unhooking is a very quick thing, and also moving the propane tanks back. There's lots of room there. I can just set the bars and stuff. So it's going to Florida. I unhooked 5 times. But as I said, I've often sat in a gas station for 5 minutes waiting for somebody to move their car because that was the only pump that I could use to get
yep
in and out. And
Yeah, our last tow to Utah in our diesel truck, we waited at that gas station for
I mean, we
it
waited
was
20 minutes or
yeah,
more just to get
Yeah.
just to
just to
even
get in.
fuel up, to
Yeah.
get there and fuel up, and so it was 30-40 minute stop. And I know that's not all the time, but still,
Yeah.
it does happen. So
And
Well, and
it's
what we find, oh, go ahead.
well, I was just like, it's we when you factor in all of those things, we started looking around and we're like, it nearly takes the same amount of time for us to stop just to get into a gas station. And I think we, waited 20 minutes to pull in, and the kids and I even went in and we needed to eat at that time. And the line for food was terribly long. And so then Steve came in, after he finally fueled up, and we're still standing there waiting to,
that's
get
right.
food.
Yeah.
And Steve's like, this is taking forever. And we had already towed with the Tesla at that point. So I think we were all kind of like
Yeah.
a little frustrated that it was taking like longer than a charge stop would at that point. So we were like, oh my gosh.
Yeah.
Well, and what we found in down south with the V3 chargers, that even if I did have to unhook, the charge is so quick, you usually run out of time anyhow.
Yep.
So Heather would, while I'm unhooking, she'd go in the trailer and start getting lunch ready or whatever we were going to do, and then I could have lunch, and by then the car's charged anyway. So it's
Yeah.
We did a recent trip to Kansas City, which isn't too far, but we cooked dinner because it was around supper time, and yeah, the car was, what did we get to, 98% or something?
Yeah.
By the time we were done, we're like, actually, it had stopped charging.
Yeah, it stopped
It was
charging.
just like, holy cow, you just lost track of time. But
Well, we were just cooking, and we thought we'd have
Yeah,
tons of time, and then the charger got in and just set in at because it was a little bit slower of a
oh,
charger.
it totally is slow charger.
But it set up there at the highest that it could and stayed there for such a long period of time. We're like, oh, this is going faster than we anticipated. And so by the time we got done, it had stopped because
Yeah.
it was fully charged.
But if you ever want to go back to a Model X, I'm sure we could rig that up for you.
Yeah.
Yeah, that would be, and we love the Model X for the family because the dog had space and the kids had space, and we really do miss that. Or maybe we need to try an R1S.
It's still on the public charging network.
It is still on the
I
public
want Andy's car.
yeah.
It might be a little crowded with the kids and the dog, though. That's the only
Well, so we had what was it? Was it a 12?
It was a 12.
Model S? This is when we just did videos on our adventures, and so we were called Trail Less Traveled then, and so we didn't think it was worth letting people see that we had a Model S at the time. And anyways, where I'm going with this is I felt like that thing had plenty of space for the dog. It was lower to the ground, so the dog could get up in there easier.
Yeah.
It had the frunk for
Luggage.
luggage. We didn't ever tow with it, so like when you're towing, you don't have, for us anyways, we don't really put anything in the car as far as like packing stuff because it's all in the camper. So I don't know. I feel like I'm trying to. This is me a seller on this.
Before I know it, we're gonna have a trip planned up to come to Ontario, Canada this summer, and a Model S is magically gonna appear in the driveway.
It's a very fun car, that's for sure. It's really enjoy it.
Yeah.
So
Get the 19-inch wheels if you get one. That's the only.
Does that help?
Yeah. Well, there's less rolling resistance with them, but when you're towing with it, the 21s, it's a pretty short sidewall. So that's
I see.
Now the air suspension makes up for that a little bit. But it's cool. I don't know if you've seen it, but they have a new thing now that your car gives data on the road conditions. So if you're coming along to say a bridge that's all rough, it'll come up a little message, suspension raised for rough road, and it goes across the bridge and then it lowers back down again.
Whoa.
That's awesome. Huh.
And then the S has 2 ride heights. So whenever you're on an expressway, it goes to the lowest ride height. But say I-75 coming into Detroit, which they've never succeeded in making smooth. I just click it up to the medium height, so it's got a little more suspension travel.
Yeah. Nice. So let's get into some fun numbers. What is the watt hours per mile that you are getting regularly, I guess?
Well, yeah, so that trip to Colorado and back, I was 628 watts per mile. So that's going to be what is that going to be? Just about 1.4 watts miles per kilowatt.
Okay.
And and that was at 60 miles an hour the entire trip. I just left it set on cruise at that. And then going to Florida, I was a little higher. I averaged about 680 for that trip. And I wasn't on that trip. I decided, well, I'm not going to try and be so scientific in that. I'm just going to drive the car. I'll see where my next charger is and what my range is going to be and stuff like that. So there's a couple of legs there that are about 110 miles. So I went a little slower. And then we got down into Florida where the superchargers were so close that I was running 65 or so most of the time. And and that's certainly easier. And when I charge, I always have the next supercharger in my nav. And so I know the distance to it, and I know how many watts I have, or percentage of battery I have left. So if I'm 50% battery and 50 miles left, I know I've got lots of leeway.
Yeah.
That's getting closer, and I don't look at it nearly as much as I used to because you kind of get used to it.
Yeah.
Well, that's really good. And what would you attribute that more to how streamlined you've made the Airstream?
Yeah, that would help a lot. And then of course the car's much more. For example, compared to say the Rivian you're using, you sat down and said, how unaerodynamic a vehicle can I build? You come up with something pretty close to a pickup truck.
Yes.
Yeah, true.
It was funny, in the old days, if we were running down to Ohio or someplace or Indiana with a pickup, we'd always open the tailgate if there was nothing in the back, thinking it made it more streamlined. And then Transport Canada actually did some wind tunnel testing and discovered that pickups were more aerodynamic with the tailgate closed, because it forced to fill the vacuum behind the cab. So it's a combination of those two things. And then it may be not as big a difference with a conventional square nose trailer, because a pickup does help to break some of the airflow for the trailer. I find with an Airstream, the more air that hits it, the better it tows. It's more stable on the road, and you don't really have that same loss of performance that you do with the square ones. But
yeah. And it's funny because a lot of people, and I still wouldn't recommend like going out and your first electric vehicle experience is towing, but the Airstream and the electric vehicle for a person that's just getting into towing, like the stability of the Airstream and the stability of the EV going down the road, you don't feel that movement that you feel with a traditional trailer and a truck, and it just feels so solid going down the road. It's incredible.
It's so we do in March every year we take a couple of Sundays and we do a beginner's RVing seminar.
Oh, awesome.
So people can come and we teach them about what to look for in an RV and that sort of thing. And it saves us a lot of time because we answer all those questions at once. And
yeah.
On those days, we usually have about 10, 12 combinations hooked up for test drives. So we have bigger trailers, smaller ones, and all the rest of it. Whenever somebody tows with the Tesla, they don't do any more test drives.
Yeah.
This is it.
It's just incredible how solid they are.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I want to come to that.
I know, right? Might have to make the trip up.
Yeah.
We always love, like, people helping other people figure it out, because it is a big deal to figure out what combination that you want. I mean, we went through 4 different setups before, we landed on, figuring out that we wanted an Airstream and we wanted an electric vehicle. And then finally, and it was because we had a square nose trailer for the Tesla.
Oh,
And
yeah.
then,
I remember
after
that.
we got to that point, yep. And
I saw your video and went, oh, that's the wrong trailer.
Yeah.
yeah. And so then we rented the Airstream to tow, and we were like, okay, this is great. And it took us a while to make the leap and actually buy one, but now.
And ours was always not okay. So like we're rooted in thinking along the lines of manufacturers, like what it can tow and all this stuff, and so that was our way of thinking. And then we weren't going to compromise like the living for our family, and so that's the reason we chose that 194 BHS. It wasn't necessarily I knew it wasn't necessarily going to be very good for the electric vehicle, just like it wouldn't have been very good for the pickup or anything like that as far as efficiency goes. And so we've always said to ourselves, we're not going to compromise the living space, for our family, because we need to feel like, it's meeting our needs in that respect first. We can always modify our trip however it needs to be to get there, as long as we have that for our family. And
Comfort,
so that's why we kind of went down that road. And I did quickly realize it wasn't the best. It still did pretty good. We went to
South Dakota.
South Dakota, and that was a pretty easy trip.
Yeah. You got the supercharger network, though, so.
Yeah, that's exactly right.
When about 2017, the Tesla Owners Club invited me to come speak to their meeting about towing. Mm-hmm. And I said, well, I haven't towed with a Tesla yet. So I said, I can give you my best educated guess, but I can't actually, I haven't towed with one. So so we went down to it, and we took, we have a little trailer we sell called an Alto that's very light and aerodynamic. Mm-hmm. So we took one of those, and we took a 22-foot Airstream Sport down, thinking those were the two best trailers for a Tesla. And of course, at the time, everything was a Model S or a Model X. So the people came out and looked at the trailers, and it was, okay, but they weren't wanting that. And that's what they were about. They wanted an electric car, but they weren't going to compromise.
Yeah.
So the next time we went, I took a 27-foot, so that was far more about it. So.
Yeah. Well, and that was something that, when we finally got to get in a 30-foot Airstream, both of us walked in and we were like, oh, we can do this. This is great. There's room for the kids. There's room for us. There's seating. It was a totally different from, going into where we were going to have to take the dinette and change it into a bed for the kids and stuff, and switching to the 30 where everybody has their own space. And we were like, oh, this is not compromising at all.
Not at all.
Yeah.
So what we teach people to do is, or try to anyway, is to not just look at a tow rating on a vehicle, to look at the properties of the vehicle that are going to make it a good or a bad tow vehicle.
Yeah.
And so we look at the rear overhang as a percentage of the wheelbase. If you look at the wheelbase in isolation, it doesn't help you. You got to look at how much overhang there is to correspond with that. And center of gravity and the type of suspension, the tire wheel sizes. There's a whole bunch of factors that go into that over the years and testing and everything. We figured out that these really make a big difference. Mm-hmm. So you can buy some truly horrible tow vehicles with very high tow ratings.
Yeah.
And you can buy some great one, like the Tesla is probably the best thing I've ever towed with, and I think it's 1,000 pounds or zero. We've probably done 250 Chrysler 300s. They're 1,000 pounds. They, up until they worked quite well. So if you look at the properties of the vehicle, you get a better combination in the trailer than you do just going blindly following the tow rating. And the manufacturers, it's not that the car manufacturers are evil doing that. I was explained that a car manufacturer, there's nothing scarier than a tow rating, because they get control of about 30% of the equation. They build the vehicle. They have no idea the balance, the dynamics of the trailer that's going to get hooked on. They don't know how it's going to get hitched up. They really don't understand hitches. So then, so the only time they're going to put a high tow rating on something is if they're going to sell enough of them, and it's going to be a profitable enough vehicle to be worth putting that risk on. So it becomes a risk versus reward thing. And then they know some vehicles, when people buy, there's a particular SUV that has a ridiculously high tow rating, did for years. They know from market research that everybody's going to look at the tow rating when they buy that vehicle, but almost nobody's going to tow much.
Yeah.
So it's the few that have an issue, they'll deal with that. But in the meantime, they want to sell a lot of a pretty profitable vehicle and not lose sales because the tow rating was too low.
Yeah.
In a sedan, not many people are going to tow with one anyway, so it's just not worth the risk to them to do it.
Yeah, that's interesting.
Yeah.
I can see your brain going.
Yeah, no, I love hearing this.
Yeah.
And so, a couple things that people, I'm sure anyways, so if you have, the manufacturer slaps that on there, and you go in and modify a hitch that makes the vehicle more than capable of towing a trailer, is there any downside to that, I guess?
Well, if the hitch caused a problem, then it's going to be, that's going to come back to us they're not going to warranty something that the hitch caused.
Yeah.
It doesn't affect the warranty on any other part of the vehicle. At least we've never had that. And there's been thousands of these. But we did a few years ago, we had a BMW that we did, and they changed the type of steel they used. We'd done a bunch of these, and they changed the type of steel, and that steel cracked. So we had to replace that part and figure out a different way to put the hitch in that. That's about the only one I can think of that we ever had a problem with. But
it's so interesting because you're just, until you start digging into it and figuring these things out, they just are blindly following it. They're like, this is what it says that it can do, so this is the only thing that it can do. And it's so awesome to see, you towing with a Model S, and we had Ray that came down with the with his setup, and Model Y, and it was like watching him pull it, and we were all like, wow. It was eye-opening. And then, where'd you come from? And Canada. And everybody was just, blown away. So.
And Ray is such an awesome guy. So it was so much fun to have him there.
Yeah.
But, you sit down and actually do the math. It makes sense. I always say people, their impression is the more sheet metal a vehicle has, the better tow vehicle it's going to be. But that's just not often the case. It's more about the suspension layout and all that sort of thing. And and you watch TV, how many millions of dollars do they spend saying my truck tows better than his truck? That you have to have a truck, right? So that's and great if you want one. There's lots of you. I always say a friend of mine drives an F-250, and he doesn't tow or carry anything. He just likes to drive it, and that's fine. But don't buy one just because you think you have to have one. There's lots of other options out there.
Yeah. Well, it's the statistic that I've read is 75% of truck owners tow one or less times per year, and basically saying they never tow.
Yeah, no, that's right.
So it's people buy the trucks probably for the not the utility that they're built for. So
it's funny. For years, cars, they would always try and design them to have a lower center of gravity for more stability and more control. And now the new trucks, especially the 3/4 tons, they're ridiculously tall and top heavy. They really don't tow that well. They're big, heavy vehicles, so people's impression is that they do. But if you actually start testing them start trying to do invasive lane changes and things like that, and measuring stopping distance and stuff. They're quite pitiful. But it's but of course it's got a bigger number on the fender, so it's got to be better. So
Very true.
most people don't. If I go to an Airstream rally and do a towing seminar, I'll walk the rows of the rally before I go in, and I might find 5 trailers out of 100 that are really hooked up well. You almost never see one with the hitch really dialed in the way it should be. So if you hook up a 150 wrong and you hook up a 250 wrong, the 250 will feel better. It's probably not as safe as the 150, but the impression is that it feels better. So most people have never actually towed a properly connected trailer. So.
I would agree with that. That's my first experience buying a camper really first experience. But anyways, I went to somebody and purchased a camper, and they set it all up, and it was horrible. And I'm like, this is not going to work out. And so me being the way that I am, I'm like, okay, let's think back through this whole process. And I dug into how it was set up. And I can't remember specifically how far it was off, but it was, over a couple inches off, just the ball height itself. And anyways, once I got that changed, it totally changed how it felt. It was
a small adjustment makes a huge
So
on our website in the video section, the first video is about a half hour long of how to set up a weight distribution, and it's it's not like it's information we're hoarding or anything. It's all
only we can do it.
It's so hard to get other dealers to actually do it the right way. They just it's what can I install quick and get out of here, I'm afraid. And way too much of that.
It's been refreshing talking to you because, so often you do hear that the car dealer has no idea what they're talking about when they're talking about towing. And then also the RV dealer has no idea what they're talking about when they're talking about putting them together, and how much, thought and knowledge has gone into it that you'd know all of this. It's fantastic.
It was funny when we bought the Nana. Do you remember that? They would not let us tow.
Oh yeah.
The camper off the lot with the Model X.
Yeah, we had to bring our F350 because they were like, we don't think that can tow that, and we're like, well, it can.
Yeah.
And so we're like, you know what? We've got an F350. We'll just bring that.
It was
so there's a guy in Los Angeles who will do the hitch reinforces like we do. He's the only other person who does it. He doesn't do the rest of the hitch. He just does the reinforces for people. He has a speed shop kind of thing. But and he does a beautiful job. So we get emails from people all the time. And these folks from Los Angeles bought a 25-foot Airstream. They had an SUV with a high tow rating. They went to get the trailer, and the dealer wouldn't let them. Said, no, we can't hook that up. It's not safe. Well, they didn't have room in their garage for a pickup. So anyhow, they left the trailer there, caught a hold of us, and we said, well, it's a great tow vehicle, but the hitch isn't strong enough. Take it to this guy, get the hitch strengthened, and then if you like, we can send you out the rest of it, or this is what you need to buy and how you need to set it up. So they had to send everything out. Went back to the dealer. He still wouldn't let them pick it up.
Oh, jeez.
Oh, my gosh.
So they said, you've got to get your trailer out of here. It's in our way. So they lent him an F-150 to pull it to his storage spot. The F-150 was sitting on a ball, no weight distribution. Sent him out on the freeway in Los Angeles. Scared the customer half to death.
Yeah.
So then he calls me. He says, I don't think I can tow with this because this F-150 was all over the place. I said, well, and I thought they'd used his hitch because it would be all wrong. And he said, no, they had their hitch. I said, well, what kind of hitch was it? And he said, well, it was just a ball. So you were comfortable sending this guy out with just a ball with 1,000 pounds of hitch weight on an F-150, but wouldn't set up his car that was all dialed in and everything. Anyway, they've been towing with it ever since.
That's awesome. It's terrible.
Yeah.
You did
and
that.
So many people that run into it, and they're just the education, and it needs to somehow get to the ears of people beforehand. I think people go through these stories and then they go out and they find the information, and it's like, people just do your research before, and
Yeah.
and I mean we're just as guilty, obviously, because
Yeah.
we had a bad tow experience, and then we went and figured it out, so
Yeah.
but yeah, it has been awesome talking to you. What is your website so people can find you if they want to, go see some of those videos or have you set up a hitch for them?
Yeah, it's canmrv.ca, and then there's I've written a column for RV Lifestyle magazine in Canada here since 1987. So a lot of those columns are online on their site, and if you just Google Hitch Hints, it'll come up for that one. And there's a bunch of information.
Yeah. Thanks for joining us today. It has, like I said, been
Thank
a
you
blast. Lots of fun information. So.
Yeah, I really enjoyed it. Thank you.
Thanks, Andy.
Thanks for listening. Find all of our show notes at allelectricfamily.com/allelectricconversations. Be sure to connect with us on YouTube, Instagram, TikTok, and Facebook at All Electric Family. Find us on Twitter as All Electric Fam. You can find our podcast on iTunes, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. If you enjoyed this story, please be sure to share it and hit that subscribe button. Leave a review and help inspire others to hit the road. Until next time, stay charged.